Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. I'm political editor Jeff Pender. I'm joined this morning with reporters Michael Goldberg. Michael.
Good morning, Jeff.
And Taylor Vance.
Morning.
Guys, y'all had a pretty big, very interesting story this week. I guess we'll start out talking about a look into something that doesn't often get that closely looked into, but some lobbying efforts surrounding the push for legalized online sports betting. Michael, just give us a thumbnail sketch of the story you guys had this week.
Sure. So we reported this week that House Speaker Jason White, a few of his staff members, and a few spouses went on were treated to the Super Bowl in New Orleans this year in a excursion that was paid for by DraftKings, which is an online gambling giant, one of the largest and most popular platforms that facilitates mobile sports betting. Now, the group of 7 that were photographed in photos that we found on social media, this group went on this excursion just days after the speaker oversaw the passage of a law, I believe for the 3rd time, to legalize mobile sports betting. Of course, as we'll probably get into, that effort to legalize mobile sports betting has died in the Senate, so it's not law. But that is precisely why the mobile sports betting has poured money into Mississippi, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I was going to say that's one thing in y'all's story that really stood out is, and I guess due to lack of transparency on such issues in Mississippi, but what you were able to figure out is that I guess essentially through last year or maybe early this year, something approaching $500,000 has been put into lobbying.
I want to say $454,000.
Yeah, a little over $450,000. That's just Mississippi over the past 2 years, and that includes campaign donations that PACs and affiliated groups have donated to various legislators.
Sure.
And politicians. That includes meals for in lobbying, meals for elected officials, and just ad campaigns, money paid to lobbyists to employ them and everything, like that. About $450,000.
Right. And, there is, in the case of Mississippi's lobbying disclosure laws, there is some sort of ambiguity as to what will be reported and when. In this case, just to sort of tease it out, on this trip, there were photographs of the speaker's staffers in a luxury box at the Superdome. There were photos at a quite fancy restaurant in New Orleans, or I'm told it's fancy. I've never been there myself. Taylor and Jeff, I think.
But at this point, we don't know exactly what.
We contacted DraftKings and asked them to detail exactly what they paid for. We received confirmation that the tickets were paid for to the game, which likely cost tens of thousands of dollars.
But they didn't say.
And again, I just want to kind of emphasize this. This was not the Ole Miss LSU game in Oxford, even though I think, Jeff, you've reported on some of those tickets before. But
lawmakers get a lot of tickets to a lot of things.
This was not a college, football game. This was the Super Bowl.
And retail tickets start at what?
About
close to
$4,000. We found the estimates varied, but you had the group in the box. They were mingling with Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who herself actually in 2024 got in trouble for faced questions, got in trouble for going to the Super Bowl. There was also Speaker White's taxpayer-funded security guard was photographed on this trip in New Orleans in front of the Superdome. We reached out to the Department of Public Safety and they said it would not be unexpected for a taxpayer-funded security detail to travel with a speaker on a out-of-state trip like this.
Sure. One upshot of this, and actually we've discussed this in this podcast in the past over the past months. It was obvious this weird legislative session that the House leadership was pushing full bore for online sports betting legalization, to the point of we get reports from the Senate that they're threatening to hold up other legislation unless we go along with the sports betting. Well, I guess $500,000 in lobbying effort and going, Super Bowl tickets and all that might help explain why there's such a push. I would say this is a lobbying effort just from what we've been able to see so far. One of the biggest lobbying efforts money-wise that we've seen in quite a while. But another upshot of this, and it shows, and this is something that's come up time and time again, Mississippi has very weak laws on lobbying, ethics, and campaign finance. Very weak laws, very weak requirements for letting the public peek at it. And beyond that, very almost, as it's been described, non-existent enforcement. If sometimes when you look at campaign finance and stuff, if it appears there's been a violation, all the authorities you would think in other states would look into it, say, well, don't look at me. I don't have the authority. Ask them. Taylor, there were efforts this year at least some campaign finance reform, but
most of them failed.
How far did they get?
I think they got out of committee, got onto the floor. There was some floor amendments.
Got out of committee after being stomped on pretty hard.
Right. And I think they all died.
One might surmise that the Mississippi legislature, just for whatever reason, doesn't want to regulate itself when it comes to
stunned.
Special influence and money. Our laws and our reporting compared to other states are just totally pale.
And Jeff, I hope listeners and the public, I hope they understand sort of why we highlighted some of this. I don't think, from my standpoint, it wasn't just to, make some jokes about the Super Bowl. It was sort of to point out that there is a big gap in this process.
Sure.
And because of the how most state officials are interpreting the law and how lobbyists are interpreting the law, is that basically, if they represent an organization such as DraftKings, FanDuel, whoever, and that company, wants to fly, half the legislature out to the College World Series, the Super Bowl, whatever, and it's about major legislation, or if they are pushing for major legislation,
right.
Being considered in the middle of the legislative session, the public will have no clue about that. Mm-hmm. That won't show up in reports until basically a year later, next January.
Right. And we should say there were a round of reports for individual lobbyists due April 16th. We, of course, checked on those, and the lobbyist registered to represent DraftKings in Mississippi did not file this trip in his latest disclosure report, the end of session report that was due on the 16th. The justification for that, when we reached out to DraftKings, was that the individual lobbyist himself did not finance these tickets. So therefore, the client deadline, which I believe is January 2026, they would have until then if they were to disclose any expenditures from this trip. So
it's a year after the fact.
A year after. So it's the distinction between client and individual lobbyist.
Right. So Jeff, I know this may make me seem like such a radical here, but there are some states that have what's sort of called no cup of coffee law.
Oh yeah, and many states have what they call gift laws.
Yeah,
it's either the no cup of coffee. A few states have rules where a legislator, for instance, could not accept a meal or even a cup of coffee from a lobbyist. Other states have laws where if you did accept even a cup of coffee, you've got to report it. Some states require the actual politicians themselves to report what they receive. We don't. We don't have a gift law. And I think the way I've described it in maybe a few columns before is essentially a Mississippi politician, someone trying to lobby them, could give them, as I've said before, just because I really want one, could give them a $2,000 Benelli shotgun. And that's okay. Technically, it's supposed to be reported. Let me just leave it at that. Technically, that's supposed to be reported. But you could use other examples. I mean, essentially, we don't have a limit. Someone could give a lawmaker a F-150 pickup truck. Is the way things have worked. The only reform we've seen in any of this came in like 2017, 2018. 2018, it finally passed. Mississippi finally joined pretty much all other states in saying that you cannot use campaign finance donations for personal expenses. And if you think the logic in that, you're a politician, someone gives you money and you can use it for any personal expense. Well, as many people pointed out, that sounded like legalized robbery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess to be a little fair, remind us, who was the House member who handled the legislation for those reforms?
Now House Speaker Jason White. Actually, he did. He handled the floor work and helped get that reform passed. However, that reform kind of fell short in a lot of areas. It was ambiguous in some areas. It grandfathered campaign accounts as long as you keep a separate accounting. It grandfathered that campaign money and that you can pull it out. And
sure, as
long as you pay taxes, which I don't know that was being done before. For instance, current Governor Tate Reeves right now has a separate legacy account.
About $2 million.
Got about $2 million in it. When he leaves office, as long as he pays the tax bill on it, that's his. He can take it and, spend it.
But he could still maintain that account after he leaves office, I believe.
I believe he could. Again, he has to keep that separate.
Yeah.
And again, the law was kind of vague. I believe that account has been earning interest. Mm-hmm. It raises all sorts of questions. In the past, some governors have kept spare money from their campaign account. Some, such as Phil Bryant, I believe, gave to charities and other politicians.
Right.
But that's not required if someone wants to pocket it. But when you get into the Mississippi ethics laws, Mississippi campaign finance laws, and the reporting requirements, again, we're so far behind. Our campaign finance reports can still be written in crayon. They're not searchable. They're not actual data. They're PDFs.
You can take a picture.
It's a picture of a record. I mean, pretty much any other state, all surrounding states, Alabama, Louisiana,
those liberal bastion states.
A citizen can get on their computer, type in a donor's name, and find out who they've given to and how much. Or they can type in a politician's name and see, what they've received. Mississippi's not like that. There have been efforts, including earlier this year, to require digital reporting, record keeping, but that goes nowhere. And it's amazing that you talk about a bipartisan
consensus
effort to kill these bills. They take turns killing it.
Well, when there are, potentially tickets to the Super Bowl up for grabs, you see why, there might be some opposition to making changes.
Yeah, and I've always thought in Mississippi, taxpayers ought to at least have a fighting chance to know how much money and from whom politicians might be influenced, but that's not the case. Trying to figure it out takes a lot of hard work, like what you two guys did this week. That was not easy, and you didn't just go to a report like you would be able to do in other states. It took a little more work than that, but it was an interesting article. I think we've gotten a lot of response from it. Anyway, with the online betting effort, we think lawmakers are about to come back into special session. Is there a chance that could come up?
That's, Republican Governor Tate Reeves gets to set the legislative agenda during a special session. And I think at his last press conference, he was asked if he would consider adding other topics to the agenda. Well, let me back up. We have to set a budget. That's the main topic.
Sure,
that's the main reason for the special session. He was asked if there would be other topics such as mobile sports betting.
He was asked about that.
He was asked specifically, and he said he's open to it. He certainly didn't shoot it down.
He was not enthusiastic about keeping lawmakers in Jackson any longer than they have to be. But he did not shoot down that that prospect. It's also, I think, important to point out, and we've, I think, alluded to it in this episode, that there were, consequential gaming-related bills that Senate lawmakers told us were held up as a result of the, failure of mobile sports betting to advance that chamber, one of which would have attempted to recover child support money that was potentially being squandered in casinos. There was some tidelands reform that the Secretary of State has wanted. So it really is, whether it returns in a special session or, next year, it's, I think, fair to say that the mobile sports betting has been between the chambers. It really has shaped some of the most consequential pieces of legislation this session and has been a roadblock to others making it across the finish line.
And it should be said, I think you guys pointed out in your story, that this isn't peculiar to Mississippi. This, push for sports betting, and quite a few states have it already, correct?
Quite a few states have it. In some states, there are only single operators. So it's hard to sort of land on a particular number, but Mississippi has been one of the holdout states amid fears that it could kind of undermine the bottom line of the state's casinos. There's also a kind of public health concern about gambling addiction, et cetera. This is a Bible Belt state, so there's long been opposition from religious institutions to the potential spread of gambling.
But the states that have it, they have seen a lot of revenue from it.
Sure.
And the estimate in Mississippi, I believe, projections between 40, maybe as much as 80 million in revenue that proponents believe the state is missing out on.
At least one neighboring state, not projection, but I can't remember if it's Tennessee. At least one neighboring state has hauled in 140 million in tax revenue from. So we're talking big money, big industry.
And you're talking, big money in revenue at a time when Mississippi potentially stands to lose revenue as a result of cutting the state income tax. So it certainly came up in that debate as well as kind of a means to offset, potential revenue losses in other areas.
Add another big issue to the watch list this spring or summer, as far as potential special session, which as of this point, we still don't know exactly when that might be, except Taylor, I think you had a story last weekend, I believe, that might indicate there's still not total agreement on budget and
No. It seems like the Senate does not want the polite term for it is a local projects bill. I think what a lot of people refer to it as is a Christmas tree bill.
Right.
So basically, the legislature uses its sort of excess revenues and divvies it up for around the state for local projects, and some of those projects I think are useful, like a new volunteer fire station. Some I would question.
Some you could
argue they're not really that useful, but it seems as though the House leadership really does want a Christmas tree bill. The Speaker sent a pretty stern letter to Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, criticizing him for not wanting a Christmas tree bill in the final budget this year. So we will see how that shakes out.
Okay.
We might start taking bets on that. We just can't. We just can't do it on our cell phones.
Not yet. But okay, guys. Well, be a lot to keep an eye out for this summer and this special session. And thanks for the rundown and a really good article this week. Very interesting.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.